Hello everyone and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to thank you for being here tonight, for subscribing, for sharing your time. These stories take courage to tell, and it means a lot to me that you choose to listen. Tonight, we're heading deep into the Appalachian Mountains, a place of great beauty, but also of silence, shadows, and things that don't always make sense. These are disturbing encounters, true or inspired by real experiences told in the first person. As always, viewer discretion is advised. Now, let's begin.
I grew up in a very small town in the foothills of the Appalachians. This was the early 1990s, before cell phones, before internet reached most of our homes. Life there felt slower, isolated. Everyone knew one another, and most people were either farmers, miners, or working odd jobs to scrape by. I lived with my grandmother. She was old-fashioned, and she had this way of mixing religion with folklore, so I grew up hearing a lot of warnings. She used to tell me, never whistle after dark, don't answer if you hear your name called outside at night, and if the woods go quiet, you come straight home. At the time, I thought these were just her quirks, maybe things she had learned from her own parents or grandparents, back when superstition was how people explained the unknown. I didn't take them seriously. The memory I'm about to share happened when I was around 10 years old, and it stuck with me my whole life. It was late summer, August maybe, when the days were long and heavy and the air seemed to press down on you. That evening, the sky had been gray for hours, the kind of sky that makes the whole town restless because you know a storm is coming. By sundown, the wind had picked up, rattling the loose metal on barns, carrying the smell of rain and soil. I was sitting in the living room, half dozing on the couch, when the storm finally rolled in. You could hear it long before it reached us, low thunder echoing across the hills, growing closer each time. The house we lived in was old, with a tin roof, and when the rain started, it hammered so loud we had to raise our voices just to talk. My grandmother stayed in the kitchen, cooking. She never liked storms. She'd mutter little prayers under her breath, sometimes crossing herself without realizing. I, on the other hand, was curious. At that age, storms fascinated me. I remember pressing my bare feet onto the cool wooden floor and walking to the front door. The screen door was thin, rattling in the wind, and beyond it I could see the yard already shiny with water pooling. For some reason, I decided to step outside onto the porch. The air felt electric, that sharp metallic smell like iron filling my nose. My skin prickled with goosebumps even though it was still hot and humid. At first, everything felt normal for a storm. The rain was pounding, the lightning flashing far away, but then I noticed something odd. The woods had gone quiet. I don't just mean quieter than usual, I mean silent. No crickets, no frogs, no night birds. Even the wind seemed to hold back, as if the whole mountain had paused. It was such an unnatural silence that I remember feeling it in my stomach, like when you know you're being watched. I gripped the porch railing and squinted into the trees, waiting for the next lightning strike. When it came, the yard lit up in a flash of white so bright I could see every branch and blade of grass. And that's when I saw it. There was something clinging to the trunk of the oak tree closest to the house. It was high up, maybe 20 feet off the ground, pressed against the bark like some animal trying to hide. But it wasn't an animal. Not one I'd ever seen. Its limbs were too long, too thin, stretched at odd angles. The joints bent wrong, almost backwards, and the way it held itself was unnatural. Its face, or what I thought was a face seemed faintly luminous, as if it reflected the lightning in a way the bark didn't. The thunder followed a second later, and darkness swallowed it again. My body locked up. I wanted to run inside, but something in me needed to know if it was really there. Another lightning flash came, closer this time, and it was no longer in the tree. It was on the ground, closer to the porch. I swear my breath caught so hard it hurt. My heart pounded in my chest, and all I could hear was blood rushing in my ears. The figure's shape was clear for a moment in the light. Tall, wrong, with a head that tilted too far to the side, and then darkness again. I bolted. My legs finally listened, and I sprinted back inside, slamming the door and locking it. I yanked the curtain closed, my hands shaking so badly I almost tore the fabric. My grandmother rushed in, asking what was wrong. I tried to explain, but the words came broken, choked. I just kept saying there was something out there by the tree. She didn't scold me. She didn't tell me it was just my imagination. She just put her hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "That's why you never go outside when the woods go quiet." Then she closed the door firmly, muttered another prayer, and told me to sit close to her until the storm passed. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay awake listening to the rain on the roof, half expecting to hear footsteps on the porch or the creak of the door. Every time lightning flashed through the curtains, I squeezed my eyes shut, too afraid to see what might be outside. By morning, the storm was gone. The yard was muddy, branches scattered everywhere. The oak tree looked the same as it always had. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I could have convinced myself it was just a dream. But it wasn't. Even now, decades later, I can picture it perfectly. The way its body clung to the tree, the way it stood on the ground closer than it had any right to be, and the way the silence pressed in, like the world itself was holding its breath. Since that night, I have never ignored my grandmother's rules, because I know now those weren't just superstitions. They were warnings passed down for a reason, and I will never forget what I saw.
This happened back in the summer of 2014, when I was in my early 20s. I had just moved back to Kentucky after dropping out of college, trying to save money and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. That summer, a couple of friends and I had a habit of going for late-night drives. Small towns don't have much going on, and the mountain roads felt like the only place you could breathe sometimes. We'd roll the windows down, blast music, and just drive into the dark until the gas gauge told us to turn back. One night, around midnight, my buddy Ethan suggested we stop and take a quick hike up one of the smaller trails off the road. It wasn't part of the state park or anything, just a narrow dirt path locals used for hunting and fishing. I'd never been on it, but Ethan swore it led to an old overlook where you could see half the valley. I didn't love the idea. I was tired and I didn't have a flashlight, just my phone with maybe 30% battery left. But he was insistent, and our other friend Kyle laughed at me for hesitating. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. The air that night was thick with humidity. You could smell the wet earth rising off the ground, the sharp scent of pine mixed with something sour and stagnant, like a creek that had been sitting too long. Fireflies flickered along the tree line, and the sound of cicadas buzzed so loud it almost hurt. The three of us stepped onto the trail, the gravel crunching under our boots before it gave way to packed soil. The moon was out, but the canopy of trees swallowed most of its light. Our phone screens became the only glow, casting a sickly blue tint on our hands and faces. At first, it was fine. We joked, shoved each other around, Ethan leading the way like he knew exactly where we were going. But within 10 minutes, I started feeling uneasy. The forest felt wrong. It wasn't one single thing, more like a collection of details my brain couldn't piece together. The air was too still, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. Every now and then I thought I heard a second set of footsteps, not in rhythm with ours, but whenever I'd stop to listen, there was nothing. I told myself it was just nerves. Then Kyle mentioned it out loud. "You guys hear that?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. Ethan laughed, said he was paranoid, but I'd heard it too. The sound of something walking, slow and deliberate, just far enough back that we couldn't see it. We picked up the pace, and that's when the noises changed. Instead of footsteps, it was whistling. A long, steady whistle that rose and fell like a tune someone might hum absent-mindedly, except it echoed strangely through the trees, bouncing in directions that didn't make sense. Sometimes it sounded close, other times distant, but never like it was moving away. Kyle cursed under his breath. I told Ethan we should turn back, but he kept shaking his head, saying we were almost there. The whistle stopped. For a moment, relief washed over me. But then came the voice. It was low, guttural, and it didn't sound like English or any language I knew. Just a string of syllables, drawn out, whispered, in a rhythm that felt too deliberate to be random. We froze in place, all three of us staring into the blackness behind us. My chest felt tight, like my ribs were locked. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Finally, Ethan muttered, "It's probably just some drunk messing with us." But his voice was shaking. We forced ourselves to keep walking, faster now, practically jogging. The dirt path was uneven, roots snagging at our shoes, but the need to get out was stronger than the fear of tripping. That's when the smell hit us. Rot, like roadkill left in the sun, heavy, wet, clinging to the back of your throat. Kyle gagged, pulling his shirt over his nose. I did the same. The voice came again, closer. I swear it was right behind us, maybe 20 feet back. We spun around, shining our phone flashlights into the trees. The beams cut through leaves and trunks, but nothing was there. And then the woods erupted. Not with the voice, not with the whistle, just movement. Branches snapping, brush shaking, the sound of something large charging through the undergrowth towards us. We didn't think, we just ran. Our shoes pounded the dirt, lungs heaving, branches clawing at our arms and faces. I kept my phone out in front of me, its dim glow bouncing wildly, barely showing where the path led. Behind us, the crashing sound didn't fade. It followed, keeping pace. Ethan tripped, sprawling under the ground. Kyle and I grabbed him by the arms and yanked him back up, adrenaline making us stronger than we had any right to be. We didn't stop until we saw the faint glimmer of headlights through the trees. The trail spit us out onto the road, and we bolted straight to the car. We piled inside, slammed the doors, and locked them. My hand shook so badly I could barely get the keys into the ignition. When the engine roared to life, we all sat there staring at the trail entrance. Nothing came out. The forest was still, but the smell lingered, faint even inside the car. We drove back in silence. Nobody wanted to admit how scared we'd been, but none of us slept that night. In the days that followed, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a bear, maybe a coyote, but bears don't whistle. Coyotes don't speak. And the worst part? When I mentioned it to a neighbor who had lived in the area for decades, he didn't laugh. He didn't even look surprised. He just shook his head and said, "That's why you don't go out there after dark. Some things in those woods aren't meant to be followed." I never argued with him, because no matter what explanation I try to give myself, I know deep down, something followed us that night. Something that wanted us to hear it. And the truth is, If we had stopped, if we had turned around for even one more second, I don't think we would have made it back to the road at all.
This happened just a couple of years ago in southern West Virginia, where I grew up. I was in my mid-20s at the time. By then, I had lived in the mountains my whole life and thought I understood the woods pretty well. I'd hiked most of the local trails, hunted, fished, camped. Nothing had ever happened to me that felt truly unusual. Until this night. It was late summer, one of those nights when the air is still heavy even after the sun goes down. A friend of mine, Jason, had come over. We'd had a few beers on my porch, talking about work and life and whatever else. Nothing serious. We were restless, though, and when he suggested taking a walk, it seemed like a harmless idea. There's a trail not far from my place, maybe a mile long, that loops through the woods and back toward the road. It wasn't remote, not the kind of trail you'd expect to feel unsafe on. I'd walked it countless times, even after dark. We grabbed a flashlight, an old plastic one that I knew didn't have the best batteries, and headed out. The night air was thick, almost wet. The smell of honeysuckle still clung to the edges of the woods, mixed with the damp scent of leaves and dirt. Our boots crunched on the gravel at the trailhead before giving way to the softer, packed dirt once we stepped under the canopy. The trees swallowed us quickly. I remember how different the world felt once we were in there, with only the thin circle of light from that flashlight to guide us. Beyond that circle, everything was just black. The kind of darkness you can't get in town. The kind that presses against you, reminding you how small you really are. At first, we joked around. Jason made some dumb comment about coyotes. I teased him about being scared of the dark. We weren't really paying attention, just walking, laughing, letting the beer buzz carry us along. But maybe 10 minutes in, I noticed something. The forest had gone quiet. When I say quiet, I don't mean just less noisy. I mean silent. A silence so complete it was almost physical, like cotton stuffed in your ears. The crickets stopped. The frogs were gone. Even the wind seemed to pause. I slowed down, shining the flashlight around. The beam caught nothing but tree trunks and branches, but my chest tightened anyway. Jason noticed my change in pace. "What's up?" he asked. "Do you hear that?" I said. He frowned. "Hear what?" "That's just it," I told him. Nothing. We stood there for a moment, side by side, listening. The silence rang in my ears. It was wrong. And then, a voice. It came from somewhere deeper in the woods, off the trail. Faint, but distinct enough to know it wasn't an animal. It was stretched out, hollow, as if someone was calling from far away, or through something that distorted the sound. I froze. Jason swung the flashlight in the direction of the sound, the beam shaking in his hands, but there was nothing there. "Hello?" he called. My stomach dropped. "Don't!" I hissed. He glanced at me, surprised at how sharp I sounded. But before either of us could say anything else, the voice came again. Closer. Not loud, not shouting, just closer, like it had cut the distance between calls. The words were hard to make out. It might have been saying our names, or maybe it was just a trick of the echo, but it didn't sound right. We started walking again, faster this time, back toward the trailhead. The flashlight beam jittered across the dirt path, bouncing with Jason's uneven steps. My heart hammered so loud I could hear it in my ears. That's when the footsteps started. Behind us. They weren't trying to hide. Heavy, deliberate crunches of leaves and twigs. Every time we stopped, they stopped. When we moved, they moved. Jason's face went pale. "There's someone back there," he whispered. I shook my head. No one should be out here, not at this hour. We kept walking, picking up the pace. My mouth was dry, and every muscle in my body screamed to just run, but some instinct told me not to. Like if we ran, it would chase. Then it screamed. The sound split the night in half. It wasn't human, it wasn't animal. It was both, and neither. A deep, tearing howl, metallic at the edges, that rattled my ribs and made the hair on my arm stand straight up. It didn't sound like something living. It sounded like something breaking. Jason dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the ground, lighting the trees at strange angles. We both bolted, instincts finally taking over. Our feet pounded the dirt, slipping on roots, catching on rocks. The whole time, I swore I heard it behind us. The crunch of steps, the rush of something moving fast, like it was right on our heels. When we burst out of the woods onto the road, I nearly collapsed. My lungs burned, my throat raw from sucking in the humid air. Jason bent double, hands on his knees, trying to steady himself. We didn't speak. We just stared at the trail entrance, waiting, terrified of what we might see. But nothing came out. The woods were still. The crickets slowly returned, like someone had flipped a switch back on. The world sounded normal again. After a few minutes, we forced ourselves to grab the flashlight, jog back to my house, and lock the door. We didn't talk about it much afterwards. Jason would brush it off whenever I brought it up, saying maybe it was an animal, maybe just some drunk messing with us. But I know what I heard. I've walked that trail dozens of times in daylight. I've seen bears, coyotes, people out hunting or fishing. I know what those sound like. This wasn't that. The sound that night, those footsteps, that scream, were nothing I've ever experienced before or since. I still hike, but not after dark, and not on that trail. Sometimes when I'm lying awake at night, I can still hear that distorted voice in my head, faint, hollow, calling out through the trees. And I know, deep down, that if I had answered, I might not be here to tell the story.